Howdy friends, so we're ranking 14 of the most popular post-apocalyptic worlds. So who are these 14 lucky contenders? They are Mad Max, Waterworld, Resident Evil, The Last of Us, World War Z, The Walking Dead, The Road, The Book of Eli, Planet of the Apes, Terminator, Fallout, Horizon Zero Dawn, I Am Legend, and Metro. I've already reviewed the first 8 worlds in part 1 of this video. If you haven't seen that one yet, you can find it in the link in the description below. This one focuses on the last 6 worlds, as well as the final rounds and conclusion for which world wins the title of Best Post-Apocalyptic World. So let's set the 4 criteria we're ranking these worlds on. First, ingenuity. Is the world original or innovative? Is it something new, or does it just follow existing genre tropes? World depth. Is the world broad or interesting? Are the characters, factions, or events authentic, or is it all just one-dimensional? Emotional appeal. Is the world genuinely sad or scary, or does it just tell you when you should be sad or scared? Each piece of media can get a score between 0 and 3 in each category, with a final single-point category, should you check it out, where, if it gets a point, I'll direct you to the movie, book, or game I recommend checking out. Oh, and I'm ranking them based on their worlds. So that means lore, characters, backstory, events, etc. Gameplay, mechanics, special effects, pacing aren't really going to play as much of a role. It's the world we're here to judge. Up next, Planet of the Apes versus Terminator. These worlds are unique in that they're actually quite dated, with Terminator first coming onto the screen in 1984, and Planet of the Apes first appearing in theaters as far back as 1968. Fun fact, Planet of the Apes is loosely based on a 1963 French novel, Planet of the Apes, except in French. I'll let you pronounce this rather than just saying it wrong. Both of these stories are unique because both deal with the replacement of the human race, one by machines, the other by monk. Both stories also exist around the idea of an apocalypse. Terminator is the story of a cybernetic assassin sent back in time to kill a woman named Sarah Connor, who is the mother of a key leader of the future human resistance that would be fighting against the AI hive mind Skynet, which was eventually going to take over the world. The series was a staple in the sci-fi industry at the time, with Terminator 2 being the highest budget film ever made at that time. Terminator technically takes place in the 1980s and 90s and only kind of alludes to an apocalypse that was going to take place in the future. It's not until 2009, with the release of Terminator Salvation, that we see an entire movie taking place post-apocalypse. For ingenuity, this is the story about a cybernetic assassin sent back in time to kill the mother of a leader of a future human resistance. That's just cool. This story invented a unique and rather awesome concept for the sci-fi genre. And even if the first 3 movies weren't quite as apocalyptic as the other worlds described in this video, the world of Terminator was something entirely new in the sci-fi genre and has served as inspiration for future media. Do these units in Helldivers 2 remind you of anyone? 3 out of 3 for ingenuity for this industry staple. World depth. The Terminator world has an amazing story and has aged well as far as most sci-fi movies go. Our own world is beginning to see the adoption of AI in everyday life, but I wouldn't call this story an epic sci-fi. It covers some great characters and some of the best action scenes we've ever seen. But the world, the locations, the factions, and so much within the story don't really have enough depth to make this world truly epic. The world depth of Terminator gets a 2 out of 3. Emotional appeal. On its surface, this movie is about a sunglass at night wearing killing robot punching its way through 1980s Los Angeles to get its target. But look deeper and you'll see more meaning, mostly in the character Sarah Connor, who kind of becomes the only person in the world who knows the imminent destruction that's soon gonna befall humanity, and we have to watch her feel hopeless as she tries to stop it. There's even the scene where she confronts the future inventor of the world-ending Skynet program and ultimately decides not to kill him because by doing so, she would be as bad as the machines she was fighting. Instead, she settles with just destroying his life's work and all his research and ultimately postpones the invention of Skynet. But the series gets over this by suggesting Skynet is a technological inevitability. I'm watching you, Bing co-pilot. Emotional appeal gets a 2 out of 3. Should you check it out? Yes, I mean, Terminator is an icon, not just in the sci-fi genre, but in the movie genre as a whole. It inspired so many movies, books, and games in its image that I would be doing you an injustice if I didn't tell you to watch at least the first 2. The Terminator and Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and even Terminator Salvation's pretty good. 1 out of 1. Total score is an incredible 8 out of 10. Next we have Planet of the Apes, a movie series that has had a return to theaters in recent years with its 3 new installments and a 4th on the way. Let's see if we can keep track of these. 2011's Rise of the Planet of the Apes, 2014's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, 2017's War for the Planet of the Apes, where I expected the series would come to an end, and oh no, wait, we have Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes in theaters right now as I prepare the script. Not a bad reboot when you consider the 2001 remake that kind of flopped. In all seriousness, these movies are great. They just do justice to the cinematic icon that was the 1968 Planet of the Apes, which all of these movies are prequels to. Fun fact, I didn't learn this until researching this video, but Planet of the Apes had 4 sequels between 1970 and 1973. I guess they really wanted to keep the cash train flowing with one movie after another. These didn't do too well either, and I love you guys, but I was not about to watch these just for this video review. Ingenuity. The idea behind Planet of the Apes, a world where humans have been overtaken as the dominant species by a society of uplifted apes, is actually very original. The series is meant to make you think about our place on this planet, especially in regards to other animals. It tackles big topics too, like racial persecution. They make anti-human slurs, slavery, and humans' dramatic fall from dominance to subjugation. It's a novel idea, and we haven't seen this done in any other media. 3 out of 3. World depth. With as many movies as this franchise has, it's hard to not see the in-depth world that has been created. It doesn't go so in-depth to establish large factions, trade routes, or complex social structures, but I think a lot of that is because it's trying to show that this is an emerging society and hasn't yet had time to establish these structures, especially in the newer movies. 2 out of 3 world depth for Planet of the Apes. Emotional appeal. This series does surprisingly well in this category too. The big focus on the newer movies is the character Caesar, who leads the apes through the downfall of humanity and into a new world created by apes. Caesar is unique because, unlike these other apes, he has a positive relationship with James Franco and doesn't see humans as inherently evil. The other apes, who grew up as test subjects in human-run labs, do. The other apes want revenge, but Caesar shows them that if they seek revenge, they'll be no better than the humans they hate. Also, this soundtrack, did it have any business being this good?
Alright, Mr. Giacchino, let's see what you've got for this new Planet of the Apes movie. Now remember, this is a movie about a chimp and some of his friends, so don't feel like it has to be like too emotional or anything. I think you should do just fine.
Two out of 3 for emotional appeal. Should you check it out? Yes, you should, especially when you consider how popular the prequels of the 2010s were. Even after 10 years, I'm amazed by just how good these apes look in these movies. It really shows how far we've come compared to the silicone mask of the 1968 original. 1 out of 1. That gives Planet of the Apes a solid 8 out of 10, and oh my goodness, we have a tie here between Planet of the Apes and Terminator. There's only one objective way to break the tie between these two cinematic titans.
Alright, Piper, I got a small favor to ask of you. Pick one. This one. Planet of the Apes. There you go.
Fallout versus Horizon Zero Dawn. Here's a little disclaimer, but I am a huge Fallout fan. I mean, just look at my video lineups. I collect the Fallout themed Magic cards, despite not playing Magic. I play at least one of the modern games a week. That is Fallout 3, New Vegas 4, and 76. I've got Fallout board games, hats, t-shirts, and even some of the games on consoles I don't even own anymore. I got everything short of a Fallout tattoo, so there is a chance I'm not capable of doing an objective review of this series. But I'm going to try it anyway. Fallout is the beloved post-apocalyptic role-playing game that launched in 1997 with a top-down RPG that lets the players navigate the desolate world of California in the year 2161. One of the charms of the Fallout series is the quirky nature it has against the backdrop of a war-torn world. It's like parts of the old world just refuse to die and constantly find their way into the new world that Fallout brings us. 200-year-old Nuka-Cola, anyone? After the launch of Fallout 2, which many old-school fans regard as the best of the Fallout franchise, the game struggled to find its place in the market that was quickly adapting to 3D graphics. The series tried to bring Fallout to 3D with Fallout Brotherhood of Steel on the PS2 and Xbox. The game dropped its RPG aspects and was little more than a top-down run and gun, With no sequel in sight, it seemed the Fallout series was now done. That is, until 2008, when our Lord and Savior, when Todd Howard brought it over to Bethesda Studios and breathed new life into the series with the award-winning game Fallout 3. This game brought the series back to its RPG roots and started a new generation of Fallout fanboys. This is where I come in. Multiple games and even a TV series have come out after the success of Fallout 3, and today it's one of the most recognized worlds in the gaming industry. Ingenuity. The Fallout series didn't invent the post-apocalyptic genre. In fact, the original creators credited the Mad Max movies as inspiration for the original Fallout RPG, along with the 1998 computer game Wasteland. But the world of Fallout puts its own special spin on the apocalypse. The games are filled with references to American pop culture, music, and history, from the iconic Vault Boy mascot to the use of 1950s music on the in-game radio station. The series evokes a sense of nostalgia for a bygone era, even as it explores the consequences of its darker aspects. 3 out of 3 for ingenuity. World depth. The world of Fallout is incredibly in-depth. I have played hundreds of hours of Fallout, and I still find new places, characters, and stories I never knew about. Even if you brush aside all the busy work in the games, after all, is another quest asking you to find some piece of tech on the other side of the Commonwealth really lore? The depth of this world comes from the fact that it covers everything from World War II to the year 2281. Each game has a huge array of characters, factions, and places with stories on nearly every monitor. 3 out of 3 world depth. Emotional appeal. When I first started writing this, I was going to give Fallout a 1 out of 3, but after some thought and a little Fallout 3 gameplay, I think that score would be unfair. The Fallout games might seem a little silly at first glance, but they're filled with sad, scary, and inspiring moments, from Ron Perlman's iconic Fallout 3 intro to the Brotherhood of Steel's entrance into the Commonwealth. These events have powerful emotional impact. The ever-present goofiness really reflects an optimistic spirit of the old world, a hope that refuses to die. At its worst, things like the smiling and hopeful Vault Boy is a grim reminder of how naive the old world was. I just think there's more depth to the goofiness we see, so I'm giving Fallout a 2 out of 3 for emotional appeal. Finally, should you check it out? I've played over 1,000 hours of Fallout. Of course you should check it out, but I recommend starting out with Fallout 4, then heading over to New Vegas. New Vegas has the best story and the best characters, but the combat's a little more dated, so you might want to try something like Fallout 4, or maybe even Fallout 76. It's gotten better. Do that to get hooked on the lore, then give Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3 a try. 1 out of 1. That is an incredible 9 out of 10 for Fallout. My baby really deserves it. Horizon. I put this game in here because I wanted an apocalyptic game that could serve as a peer for the Fallout series. And now that I'm revisiting this series, I'm actually quite impressed how clever and creative the Horizon world is. The premise of this game is, long ago, military robots went rogue and began to self-replicate and even consume biomass for fuel. It was kind of a failed program that was actually kind of stupid when you think about it. Why would scientists make robots that could self-replicate and consume biomass? Do you want an extinction? Because that's how you get an extinction. But it happened, and nearly all of humanity was wiped out. In the 31st century, humanity is still holding on in the most primitive state, and those killer robots have basically taken the place of animals across the world. It creates a world that's unlike any we've seen in any apocalyptic game. For ingenuity, I'm giving Horizon Zero Dawn a 2 out of 3. It has new ideas and adds its own flavor to the apocalypse genre, and the world is instantly recognizable. But I think I could have gone a little further with how it portrayed these robots. Instead of creating really realistic ecosystems fitting for self-replicating robots, they're basically just animals with gears. It's a clever idea, but not fully realized. World depth. As I said before, I've been impressed just by how recognizable Horizon's world is by combining tribal hunters and gatherers next to mechanical animals. A world is always going to get points from me if it depicts different factions who all want different things, and Horizon does that well for the 4 tribes that exist in the first game. They have different religions, different ideologies, and different goals. However, they're kind of just shallow in their cultures. I feel like the 4 tribes were just recreations of existing real-world tribes instead of something that could fit this new world that Horizon gives us. I mean, this is an incredibly unique world, but the cultures within don't really seem to fit that uniqueness. 2 out of 3 world depth. Emotional appeal. If I was rating the game for its cool factor, Horizon would have a great score, but it didn't really have much emotional appeal. It wasn't scary, sad, or reflective, but it also wasn't trying to be. So 1 out of 3 and no hard feelings. Should you check it out? These games get good reviews for a reason, and I wouldn't be surprised if a third game came out soon. I'd give it a point here for the beauty and landscape alone. 1 out of 1. That's a total score of 6 out of 10. Not a bad score, but 3 points less than Fallout, who will go to the next round. The final two, I Am Legend versus Metro. I paired these together because they both started as novels that got adapted into other media. Starting with I Am Legend, fun fact, I Am Legend was published back in 1954 as a novel, and is therefore the oldest piece of media on this list. Another fun fact, the movie and book were also very different stories. No, I'm not going to tell you the book was way better than the movie, but they were just two very different stories. The world of the book takes place in the future date of 1976, or at least future compared to the time it was written, and tells the story of the last man on Earth, Robert Neville, who is the sole survivor of an apocalyptic, world-ending vampiric virus. Those zombie things you see in the 2007 movie were actually just vampires in the book. Robert Neville is the last man on Earth. He spends his daylight hours trying to eradicate these vampires, as well as trying to explain scientifically their vampiric traits, such as why they're repelled by garlic, and why things like metal blades or bullets don't kill them, yet a wooden stake to the heart does. Oh, and also, the vampires talk and know exactly where Neville lives. Since he can't go out at night when the vampires are most active, he has to endure night after night of the vampires trying to get into his house. They're jiggling his doorknobs, knocking on his windows, and crawling all over the house while shouting, "Come out, Neville." The female vampires even try to, sexually lure him out. Ingenuity. As you've seen on this list, when you're the first to a genre, you get points for being original. I Am Legend was an incredible idea that had never been done before at the time. Even the movie, though, did an incredible job showing the ruthless collapse of society. In the book, Neville also discovers at the end that a new order of intelligent vampires is beginning to form, and that each of them live in fear of a legendary creature of the old world who comes and takes them away as they slumber. Neville learns he's become the creature of legend, the monster that is feared by this newly emerging world. Spoilers, I know, but come on, it's been 70 years. For ingenuity, I Am Legend gets a solid 3 out of 3. World depth. The problem with reviewing a world with a single living person in it is there isn't a lot of world to build, especially when you consider the story takes place in real-world Los Angeles. By design, the book doesn't have much of a world to review. I'll give it a 2 out of 3 world depth. Even with a single character, the author manages to show us an interesting and complex world, even if it's pretty much gone. Emotional appeal. Much like The Road, I Am Legend is a very sad book with a very sad ending. Robert Neville is truly the last person, and we have to watch him cope with that fact throughout the story. It's also a very scary book when you realize every night he is haunted by these creatures who never give him a moment of peace. There's even a scene where he's out doing his exploring, getting supplies, and his watch breaks without him knowing, and he has to race back to his house once he realizes the sun is starting to set. We also get a very unnerving backstory of Neville's experience during the collapse of society. As he learns about this virus, his wife gets infected and dies, and he has to bury her, only for her to show up at his door that night covered in dirt and attack him. 3 out of 3 for emotional scars. Should you check it out? I know I just spoiled it, but it's 70 years old, and it's one of the shortest novels I've ever read, and a staple in the genre. 1 out of 1, please read it. I don't really talk about the movie here, but it's actually pretty good too. It's just very different from the book. That is an incredible 9 out of 10. Next, we have the Metro series. Metro, a Russian masterpiece of a novel that, much like the Witcher series, started with multiple books and eventually got released as a video game. In total, there are 3 books, 3 games, 1 incredible world. For ingenuity. In the world of Metro, a global nuclear holocaust wiped out all life on Earth. The surface has become uninhabitable because of the intense radiation, and the last light of humanity exists in the tunnels beneath the Moscow Metro. Now, having your world destroyed because of a nuclear exchange isn't cutting edge or even unique in the apocalypse genre, but what makes the Metro series stand out is the story it has crafted in the tunnels, where food is scarce, monsters are ever present, and even light is a luxury. That's more in the books though. In the games, for the sake of the players, they didn't make it unbearably dark all the time, but in the books, it was. The people were so accustomed to the darkness, they believed visiting the surface in the daytime would burn them alive. 10 out of 10. 3 out of 3 ingenuity. If your story has me wanting to visit Russian public transportation systems, you've got a good story on your hands. World depth. The world beautifully and horrifyingly describes a society that was born underground. To survive, the people have adapted to this subterranean life and do things like grow edible mushrooms, some of which are made into tea. They have stations that function like their own cities with unique leaders, customs, and rules. The tunnels serve as roadways between these stations. The world even goes into explaining trade relations between the different stations. Any story that explains in-depth trade routes gets world building points from me. There's even a scene in the first book that just really stood out to me. See, the protagonist briefly ventures to the surface. It's like 2 chapters, but up until this point, the book has been showing us just how cruel and brutal life was inside the metro. Now, we are seeing what's on the surface for the first time, and it's horrifying. There are creatures that were once real-world animals or humans that have now been mutated by radiation into things of nightmares. The protagonist just barely escapes back into the metro, and as he does that, we get to see that the metro, with all of its hostilities, is like a mother's cradling arms compared to the horrors that sit on the surface. 3 out of 3 world depth, stay underground. Another fun fact for you, so I live in Oklahoma. I know that's pretty cool, but obviously I'm not very familiar with traveling by subway. I've only used subways a few times in my life when I've visited major cities in the US. So when I read about this metro for the first time, I wondered if the Moscow metro in real life was big enough to fit this massive world we see in the book, or if maybe the author had just exaggerated a little bit. Yeah, no, I looked it up. The Moscow metro is over 520 kilometers in total length, with almost 300 stations, and also some of the deepest stations in the world. It could definitely house the world described in the metro books, and then some. Emotional appeal. The premise of Metro is not too different from the premise of I Am Legend, where humanity is at risk of being replaced by a new society. You get to see the last lights of humanity scrounging to survive in this last bastion of safety. It's even frustrating because you watch as these stations divide into factions and fight with one another. They fall into the same habits of the world that just got destroyed, and I find myself thinking, you idiots, you don't deserve to survive. On top of that, it's terrifying. Like, the book describes the tunnels going between the stations as a place no one ever feels safe, because there's just too many side doors, sewer crates, and ventilation shafts that anything could come at you at any time. The world of Metro is never not scary. 3 out of 3 emotional appeal. I slept with the light on. Should you check it out? I mean, it's alright, I guess, if you're into this kind of stuff. Yes, it's so good. It's just good. The Metro series is good. 1 out of 1. And would you look at that, 10 out of 10, perfect score. And Metro will beat I Am Legend and go to the next round. Sorry, Neville. Now, that concludes the first round and leaves us with 7 remaining worlds competing for the best. The video is going to go much faster from here on because you already have the backstories of each one. Going forward, each piece of media is being measured on how it scored in ingenuity, world depth, and emotional appeal. If they're tied, for example, Fallout and Metro both have a 3 out of 3 world depth, I'm going to judge which of the two is better. If one piece of media wins this category, it gets the point, 3 points total. Since the second round has an uneven number of worlds and Metro has the highest score, it will wait until round 3. This is like describing the rules in a board game. Did I lose you yet? Mad Max versus The Last of Us. For ingenuity, Mad Max was a trailblazer in the genre. The Last of Us is certainly an interesting story with the most interesting characters, but I didn't think it had the originality of Mad Max. Mad Max gets 1 point for ingenuity. World depth. Mad Max has the deeper world, with more depth to its factions and its leaders. The Last of Us maybe has the deeper characters with Joel and Ellie as they travel across the country, and the world therein is probably more realistic to what a zombie apocalypse would actually be like, but each place looks and feels more or less the same. So Mad Max wins and gets 1 point for world depth. Emotional appeal. Mad Max is a brutal world with some tough, larger-than-life characters, but it just can't compare to the emotional tug we get from The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2. The Last of Us gets 1 point for emotional appeal. That's 2 points for Mad Max. You're going to the next round, humongous. World War Z versus The Road. 2 very different styles of apocalypse, but let's compare these apples and oranges anyway. Ingenuity. Both worlds score a 1 out of 3 because their stories didn't really contain anything dramatically new. But World War Z does go into great detail explaining how the plague began, how it began spreading, and the effects of that spread. Meanwhile, the world of The Road is intentionally kept vague for artistic direction. So 1 point to World War Z for ingenuity. World depth. World War Z got a 3 out of 3 compared to The Road's 1 out of 3 for world depth. That gives this point to World War Z. Emotional appeal. The Road is probably the most emotional book/movie I've ever never read or watched. Obviously, it gets the point here. But that will mean World War Z wins, with 2 out of 3 of the points. Again, I know these are 2 very different stories. I credit The Road as a masterpiece, but I'm judging the worlds they take place in, and World War Z by far has the more interesting world. Brad Pitt, you're going to the next round. Planet of the Apes versus Fallout. Do you want your post-apocalypse society to be ruled by apes or by a plethora of zany factions? Let's decide. Ingenuity. Planet of the Apes gets a 3 out of 3 for ingenuity compared to Fallout's 3 out of 3. Both ideas are clever and relatively novel for their time, but I'm giving this point to Fallout thanks to its incredibly in-depth lore and instantly recognizable universe. World depth. Both worlds go into detail, but it's only the Fallout series that covers the events of a continent, or at least a few more noteworthy cities across that continent. Another point to Fallout for world depth. Emotional appeal. Both stories got a 2 out of 3 for emotional appeal, and both stories really make you reflect about humanity's self-appointed role as stewards of the planet. But Ron Perlman's War Never Changes introduction of Fallout 3 just hits a little too hard for me to not give this point to Fallout. So send my resume over to the Brotherhood of Steel and call me a human supremacist because Planet of the Apes is no more. Round 3, Mad Max versus World War Z. For ingenuity, Mad Max has the higher score here, with a 3 out of 3 for ingenuity compared to World War Z's 1 out of 3. Both worlds are interesting, but only Mad Max can get credit for being a pioneer in the apocalypse genre. World depth. This one was hard because both worlds get a very earned 3 out of 3. And my cat just told me she's not doing any more tiebreakers, so I'm gonna have to go with my gut here and give the point to Mad Max. The world present in World War Z is from the perspective of individuals after the zombie wars concluded. Meanwhile, Mad Max takes place during the heat of it all, and I just think that makes the world slightly more interesting. Another point to Mad Max. Emotional appeal. Same problem, but I'm giving the point to you, Brad Pitt. Mad Max shows us the endless conflict of human beings and isn't quite as impactful. But in World War Z, the books cover the experiences of individuals still traumatized by their encounters. And the movie has that intro where we watch society just collapse into anarchy. Real powerful stuff, but still not enough to give World War Z the win. Mad Max progresses to the final round. Fallout versus Metro. This one is gonna hurt, but I've gotta be fair to the score. Ingenuity. I can sing Fallout's praises all day, but I just gotta hand it to Metro when it comes to the original idea. Both worlds were destroyed by nuclear war, and in both worlds, humanity survived by going underground. But only Metro crafted an original world in the tunnels beneath Moscow. Sure, Fallout has the vaults, and they're very clever, but I just don't think they hold up to the Metro we see in the Metro series. This point is going over to Metro. World depth. This one does go to Fallout, but just barely. Metro has an amazing world depth, but I have months of playtime in Fallout and still manage to find new and interesting content. 1 point to Fallout. And the final point, emotional appeal. I gotta be honest and give it to Metro. The struggle of watching these people fight for survival in the darkness of the Metro was terrifying for me to read and play. That means the final point goes to Metro, meaning it will surpass Fallout and contend against Mad Max for the greatest apocalyptic world. I'm sorry, Fallout, you'll always be my favorite. Final round, Mad Max versus Metro. For ingenuity, Mad Max gets the point here. I think Metro was an original idea as well, but Mad Max is still a staple in the apocalypse genre, and one slightly more instantly recognizable than the world of Metro. First point to Mad Max. World depth. This one goes to Metro. Mad Max just didn't focus as much on its world building as Metro did. Though both worlds do have details regarding trade relations between different factions, Metro gives us just that much more. That's 1 point to both contenders, so the final round will be determined by emotional appeal. And it goes to Metro 2033 for the same reason as before. It's dark, it's scary, and yet so interesting. That makes Metro the greatest post-apocalyptic sci-fi world, at least according to me, with Mad Max as the runner-up and Fallout as number 3. Now, according to my PR team, as well as my board of legal representatives, they've told my head secretary to inform me that some of you may disagree with the opinions I've stated in this video. Just know, you can always leave a comment and tell me why I'm wrong, and your opinion will be just as valid as mine because at the end of the day, we're all just talking about stuff we like. And other than that, I thank you for your time.